15 minutes now. What happened? You have heard many different stories, other different levels of intervention. Some start with the consumer behavior, some start with improving the value chain, some start with enterprise development, new business models, and they are very diverse by countries, by commodities. So take a minute of your time and think about what are the type of lessons that we can learn from that, because let's say there is no way of generalizing from one country to another or from one value chain to a second one. But I think we need to understand a little bit what type of dynamics is created in these cases. Yeah? How does it work? What type of interfaces? And also where are the tensions? Because these look like very sweet stories in a way, but I guess there were also some tensions on the way. So that's what we should try to capture, and be aware that this is, in my view, one of the unique opportunities where people from science and business and public policy meet each other. That's not usual in the CT, and I think this is a big step forward. Yes, I already saw your hand. Please introduce yourself.
Thank you. I'm IFPRI. One word that's been mentioned by everybody is consumers over and over again. But it's been at least, until the last presentation, the least explored thing here. Who are the consumers and how are they represented in making the kinds of changes that you've described? And is it just because of their spending power? What if they don't have much spending power? How is the consumer harnessed to change things across all these different sectors?
Yeah. So, but now you're asking questions, but I would like you to draw a conclusion for yourself.
Well, I mean, I'm not sure, because to me, clearly, the consumer is one of the most significant elements of this, and understanding the consumer then becomes really fundamental. So it's about how we understand.
Who has done anything in understanding consumers in the programs? Okay, I'll come to you in a minute. Over there. I saw it.
Brian?
Oh,
I have a
yes.
question.
Please.
You want to answer that question first?
No. First I raise a couple of questions and then we see.
First of all, I'd like to just touch on what you were saying, and I really appreciate your comments. I think you hit the nail on the fingers. Yeah, hit the nail on the head in terms of what the constraints are around dealing with the private sector. And that's where it really gets sticky. If we put it in context in the scope of what we're looking at here, it really is the private sector that makes food, whether it's safe and nutritious. In China, there are 400,000 food processors. In Indonesia, 350,000. And India is somewhere in excess of 300,000. So just think of the scope of what we have to deal with here. And listen, wonderful stories, anecdotal, but how are you going to deal with this in a systematic way? Okay? And dealing with the private sector, to deal with these are the issues the private sector needs to deal with, because what we're seeing not only in North America and in Europe around the world, margins are deteriorating for the food industry. They're really struggling to keep their heads above water. So if you want to engage with them and expect them to make an investment, I would also look, John, you mentioned earlier on about food safety as a success. The industry worldwide sees food safety as a non-competitive or a pre-competitive space. Can we do the same thing with nutrition? And if we can do that, how do we get the private sector engaged to adopt that from a systemic approach? Is it something like the Global Food Safety Initiative with a nutrition twist on it? And again, aligned obviously with the public good and the regulatory requirements. So that's the scope of what we need to try and deal with, and also recognizing if it's the same as it is in food safety for a small, medium enterprise to comply with food safety regulations, whether it's Codex or GFSI, costs somewhere in the order of $250,000 to $1.6 million for a small, medium enterprise. Who's going to pay for that if it is the same scenario for nutrition? So just to give you an idea of the scope of what we're involved in, but we need to find a way to do this.
So you say there are some costs and somebody has to pay for that?
You didn't introduce yourself.
Oh, I'm sorry. My name is Brian Bedard. I'm the Executive Director of the GMA Science and Education Foundation.
Okay. More comments, more lessons that you have taken on. Yes.
I'm Rob Perlberg from Harvard University. I was interested in Derek's slides, particularly the one that compared dietary diversity, I think among children in 6 different countries. I looked at those 6 countries. The countries with the greatest dietary diversity were those that had completed the Green Revolution. Sometimes we hear that the Green Revolution was good for filling stomachs but it reduced dietary diversity. What's your interpretation of that debate in light of your slides?
Okay, unexpected spillovers. The last one for the first round. Is there? Then I first go to Mr. Can you answer that question?
Yeah, it's something I've puzzled over for a while, and it's a very good question. Obviously, grain productivity is really important for the livestock sector. So you would think that improvements in grain productivity would be a big driver of livestock diversification. But I think it's sort of necessary or almost necessary, but nowhere near sufficient. I think that the countries that have seen diversification in diets have done a lot more than just conventional green revolution investments. Operation Flood in India, the Indian poultry sector is something I've been looking at recently. I mean, it picked off, it started to take off 25 years after the Green Revolution. So I don't think it was just about grains, it was getting a lot of other things right in the livestock sector. So I think, those investments in staples are important, but there's a lot more that needs to go on to proactively diversify production.
Thank you. Benjamin, about these diverse consumers.
Hi.
Hello.
This is Giordani from Gaines. I don't know if you can hear me.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Jordana.
Can I just share something quickly?
Yes, please.
So, just to the point of, we're talking about the cost of food, I just want to point out that the idea of making a non-competitive agenda on nutrition the same as food safety is fabulous, in my opinion. And so I come from Gain, and I come from a corporate background. I used to work for Nestle, and the likes. And I think that last week I was in IFM, and Ted London from Michigan University was there talking with representatives from Rabobank and from Unilever and so on. And they all agree that SMEs are a valuable tool for reaching parts that corporates cannot reach. And somebody mentioned about cost of food safety for SMEs. And if we make something like non-competitive, like food safety, but for nutrition, the way I see it happening is that we can get corporates and large businesses, they have the power to work with supply to make food safety happen. So for many, many cases, even when I was working in dairy, I was working for Frontera and selling to Nestle, and there were very heated discussions from Nestle to Frontera on who is going to take the cost of increasing test monitoring and so on. But the truth is, when giants get together, they can afford prices of changes. And by doing so, they also force that supply to start adapting to a certain model. So if we can manage to get nutrition as a non-competitive, and if we can manage to get large corporates, the supply side and the retailer part and the processor, to work on better nutrition, that will naturally flow down into SMEs, in my opinion. And I think
we will discuss that, because I think that was precisely the question, whether it will naturally fall down. That might not be the case. But thanks for your contribution on focusing on this, the fact that you have to do something sector-wide. Now we go to Benjamin, but on the consumer side, no?
Sure, to briefly touch on the question. Consumers, I don't think consumers are just their purchasing power. I think certain consumers drive the consumption patterns of other consumers. And so if you're able to understand that ecology that you're working within and that market, I think you can actually target specific consumers to drive consumption patterns of others. And how do you utilize those tastemakers in order to change greater consumer behaviors is something that we've definitely tried to work on. And it depends on the culture and market that you're working within. Very briefly, we did a partnership with TNS, it's a global marketing and advertising firm, try to understand consumer perceptions around nutrition. And it was very interesting that nutrition, no matter who you were talking to or where, is an extremely important thing to consumers. But how do you communicate nutrition to consumers? It's very difficult. My former boss, he worked in the organics. Now, is organic more nutritious? No, but many people think it is, or it stands in for that sort of stuff. And people use a lot of different terms to describe nutritious things that aren't necessarily speaking to that. And so we need to actually better understand how we communicate nutritious foods to consumers in a way that speaks to their aspirational values. And I think one last thing is that, as you were pointing out, adhering to claims and codex standards and things like that when it comes to labeling on food products is cost prohibitive to most of these companies that we're working with.
Thank you. So Nelly, you wanted to come in?
Yes, about consumers, because we do finance companies that sell to consumers. So, of course, consumers are the part of it. Marketing products to consumers costs money. SMEs don't have the means to, in Africa at least, to do that marketing. So who's going, if you want to change consumers' behavior, they have to be taught. The problem in Rwanda is that they don't make the difference between the low quality CSPs that they're sold to them, even they don't know how to read a label.
So what does that mean? You need
What
a
is,
referral?
you need, the government needs, I mean, somebody has to impose standards and somebody has to communicate those standards, somebody has to, and this comes actually, it's a public health issue. And so, and in your example, I'm pretty sure that the company that is behind this paid for the marketing at a lost cost. Okay, so and it's the impact investors that I was showing. There is no return.
Okay, now this morning you wouldn't have the remark that it doesn't come from business, it comes from outside business, from civic society. Jeroen was with Unilever in the past, so he knows how it works.
Just a comment I made is that if you really want to have change, also in this case of more nutritious foods, and you can compare it with many other changes we need in the world. And my experience is that working for big business, that it is not big business you should put your name at first behind, and also not the governments. I think you really need strong civil society movements really to get things moving. And my experience is what you then first see moving are more advanced businesses. It can be small, medium enterprise, can also be more big business enterprises. And if they start really to move, then you get some resource together from people who understand what are the issues in society and people who understand how you can, in an efficient way solve issues which matter. And then you see that governments, because they need to look after their constituents, so in the end they need to get their vote, they are also moving behind it and they understand that you need standards, legislation, etc. to support it. So my plea was that in this kind of complex issues, I'm not talking about scientific problems where you put a team of researchers behind who develop a nice program and then try to solve the issue by doing research. But these are changes of complex systems. And I think if we talk about changing the nutritional behavior of populations, but also changing the behavior of the actors who provide food, then you talk about a very, very complex issue. And my experience is, and I have been also on organizations which really did research on those issues, that only start to work if you recognize that you need those different actors, I think it was mentioned by you as well, to really work together. But again, if from base level it doesn't start, then my experience also working in big business, they don't start to move if they don't understand they have a problem. Yeah?
Thank you. We have two last remarks. You wanted to say on the consumer side, I guess? Yes. And then you have the last.
We can't hear what you're saying.
You have to speak louder.
Perhaps you stand up and
I'm just
So while consumers are not the point of intervention for us at the marketplace, just building off of what Nelly said, the businesses that we support serve consumers. And the way that the marketplace is designed is to accelerate businesses. So we select businesses that have already created a product, that already have a demand established, and we try to support them to expand that by providing them with technical assistance and financial assistance to really accelerate the business forward. So we're trying to find businesses that are reaching low-income consumers that already have demand and pushing them forward. So the consumer aspect is really represented in that sense.
Thank you. And now the last from the audience, and then we are going to try to resume a little bit.
Thank you very much. Again, on this issue of consumers, now having identified that consumers are critical in this private-public partnership, who's responsible for the education and awareness in all the aspects that we're trying to take into account here? Because, as Mary pointed out, that they need to be trained, they need to be educated, they need to be made aware. And who is taking that responsibility?
And what's the answer?
The answer, yes, I think we really have to take that into account, and I haven't had anyone mentioning about this aspect of education. Another aspect is about what are the needs in this private-public partnership. What are the kind of needs that we need to take into account? What do the private sector want, and what do we want in public, and what do we want in terms of nutrition to be included in the partnership? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now we have heard that we have an ecosystem of producers, of businesses, we have an ecosystem of consumers, we have an extremely complex situation and we don't know where it starts and where it finishes. And now Annie, who knows everything on food systems, is trying to guide us a little bit how to make the next step. I think that's the only question we can ask.